Can you both kind of just like introduce yourselves and give people a little bit of background on each of you and how you got working in footwear?
Sure. Well, let's see. I'm into 40 plus years of shoe design specifically. I come from a shoe background, and my education was fine arts, and at some point I combined the two. The first half of the 40 some years was uh, at the very highest end, working with the best factories in Italy, for very small production, where price and how complicated a shoe was no issue. And the second half, it was something that I had been longing for in the first half. I worked for major corporations, both Polo and Cole Haan, when it was owned by Nike, where I reached a larger audience. And I was fortunate enough to be with the first footwear product in all categories that included Nike technology. So I worked on projects that franchises that sold upwards of 1 million pair and several times. So I've seen both sides of footwear.
All right, Joshua Karl Johnson, and I've been in the design industry for about 20 years, 20 plus years. I also got my start. I studied fine arts, and I would say half of my career I've been more of a product designer, and the other half more into the fashion. So I have been working on a lot of technical designs, from hardware to hard goods, but then kind of bridged into fashion, leather goods, soft goods as in bags, and then later on in my career, footwear. And Terry and I have crossed paths at Cole Haan, and also both worked directly and indirectly with Nike. Yeah, I feel like my career has been quite diverse, and a little bit unique compared to some other careers out there. I have branched off into several different directions, and because of that, I believe I was set up kind of in a almost forced way to get into footwear. There was a need at Cole Haan at one point where they were down some designers, and so I hopped on, and I kind of just fell in love with footwear and the technical aspects of it, and ever since then I've been just really, not necessarily just focused on footwear, but I come to appreciate it in a completely different, light. And it's been very exciting to work on this project with everyone.
Guys, those are great answers. I'm excited. Josh, you talked a little bit about technical design and crossing over between footwear and then other like hardware and other hard goods and soft goods. Can you talk a little bit about how that helps in concepting and some things that you're sort of excited in terms of like new tech that you've been seeing, and whether or not there's any sort of cross-pollination across, hardware or bags or whatnot and footwear?
Sure. I believe when you're designing hard goods, you're basically designing it through a different type of lens than, materials that flex, and especially in footwear where there's pronation and there's all of these different ergonomical like type movements that you have to be strategic with your pattern work, at least for the more performance-based shoes. So I feel that, I would say the technical end would help with the outsole design more than anything. But also now you're seeing the uppers being, the engineered knit. The companies are really honing in on materials that can eliminate a lot of the need for many different patterns. So it's all about efficiency. I would say the bridge between hard goods and engineered knit is a little bit closer than, hard goods to traditional shoemaking. And so that's probably why I'm so excited about what's coming out in the past 5 years in footwear. It's really gone from, more natural materials to scientific materials that are actually designed in labs. So that part, I think, excites me a bit more.
Josh, that was great, and super helpful. And I think I'll probably circle back around and ask you about outsole designs, and you designed such a crazy cool outsole for Thousand Fell.
We did a cool outsole. It was definitely a team effort.
Yeah, I know for a fact that the outsole manufacturer was like, this is the coolest thing he's seen. So that was awesome. Terry, can you give us a little bit of insight into maybe some of the tech that was put in to Cole Haan shoes when Nike got involved, and how does that differ from like traditional footwear manufacturing techniques? Or maybe if there wasn't a ton there, maybe a better question is, what are some traditional footwear techniques that were really commonplace that you've seen that maybe have been walked away from or improved upon?
Well, actually, I was super thrilled the other night when someone brought up the idea that designers don't start with the material, and they should, and that's a concept from the best and the oldest Italian shoe traditions, and I see that, as more or less being something that we're headed towards. With Cole Haan, the idea was to make high-end and fashion product first as a statement with Nike technology. For instance, putting special foams and airbags in high heels, which was unheard of at the time. I mean, it was so much easier to put it into a sneaker or a moccasin, but to put it into a shoe with a 4-inch heel and have it actually work and not be something that's just a selling tool was a major challenge. But I mean, basically for me, the idea of footwear being about originality, as it was when I entered the business, and repeats itself now and then, has taken sort of a back seat to the architecture and the authenticity of the construction. And I think that for me is, very exciting. Right now, people work in more of a focused parameters of wearability and what the currency of the day style-wise is. But people are really much more drawn to shoes that are actually authentic shoemaking than shoes that just look like, for instance, look like a ballerina or look like an Air Force One or look like a combat boot. They're looking for the authenticity of the construction. So the materials are crucial, the architecture, the presence of the footwear, the way it makes you feel, and these were all things that I worked with the creative director of Nike, who was by training an architect. So these were things that we talked about most of the time. To have it be beautiful, to have people recognize it, and people with fashion taste and buyers accept the product was important, but have it function and be authentic and true were the main concerns.
Got it. Thank you. Guys, I'm going to kind of pose this to both of you because I know we've had this conversation in a couple different ways, but when looking at sustainability, what are some of the things that you guys see or think about when it comes to design? And Josh, I'll also ask this beyond just footwear with you too. You helped us kind of design our initial packaging that really allowed us to cut down on waste and be able to like use a form factor that uniquely held different product sizes in place and reduced the need for a double shipper. Like, what are some things that you guys think about when designing footwear and then just other design in general to like sustainability and waste?
Do you want me to go first, Terry?
Sure.
I think efficiency is huge, and I think the entire performance footwear industry, the entire industry has really, I think when you're saving money, efficiency becomes very important. And unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of it stems from the beginning for these bigger companies. I think the way we handled it with Thousand Fell and the way we approached it, it was much differently. And like Terry was saying, I feel like we took the material and built the shoe around the material, which I think is a really beautiful way of thinking about, sustainability and efficiency. I think in general in the footwear industry, I think that the sustainable aspect is coming mainly from efficiency first, and then secondary is, more and more the companies are scrutinizing the materials that they're using. If it's, how much recycled content that that the materials contain compared to, which we're not really seeing yet, although we're seeing in Thousand Fell with more bio type materials, which, I feel like in a lot of ways we're leading in that area. So yes, I think the way the shoe is actually built, how fast it takes to build a shoe, you look at traditional shoemaking and it would take literally days to make one pair of shoe. And now we can crank out thousands of shoe in a day because of construction, because of innovations in glues, innovation in the machines that are actually building the shoes. And then on top of all of that, you have these materials that are eliminating this pattern work. So it's just really one upper material that is glued to the outsole, so it's, again, efficiency and materials And then ultimately the way the outsole is, you know, adheres or stitched to the upper means everything. And I guess, you know, talking about and just general, like what's happening with, I think people are gravitating more towards developing new biomaterials. So we're not just digging up and recycling what we have, which is very important. But, you know, something I learned back at Nike is, and unfortunately, when you're recycling materials, it can actually be more harmful for the environment. So going forward and looking forward in a way like Thousand Fell is if we're going to use a material, let's use a natural material, let's use a biomaterial. Let's not backtrack and just focus on recycled materials. So I feel like we're headed in the right direction as a whole, the design industry. But as you know, there's a lot of challenges with costing and efficiency to get these biomaterials to perform the ways that we've kind of developed all of these performance shoes to come together. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, but I think we're headed in the right direction.
Josh, that was great. I love looking at sustainability through the lens of efficiency. That's fantastic. Terry, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, well, I think there's been an interest in sustainability for a long, long time, but as was discussed in the material segment the other night, there was a cost factor that was always standing in the way, which is thankfully being eliminated. There, in the manufacture process, there's little wastage, which is you know, a fantastic advantage over leather and so on, which is wonderful. And from a design point of view, I mean, it used to be to make a shoe in one piece with no seams was so cost prohibitive. Now that's nothing. We can put a seam in if we want, if it has a purpose, and we don't need seams at all. Shoes can be just one continuous piece. And as we go forward with the development of these materials, I'm a big proponent of shoes with very little structure. And by designing materials that go from thick to thin in the right spots and so on, we could virtually get away from all the inner construction and so on. So I love the idea of working with sustainable product, and you know, and the kids are growing up believing in it. So I think it's definitely the way to go.
Awesome, guys. I think that's all my questions I have. I think that's more than enough audio to run a segment. Is there anything else that you guys want to mention? Like, if there's any, like,
there's a lot of editing, Stuart.
No, I think it'll be
on
great.
my part.
No, it was great. You guys both provide a lot of insight, and I think I'm really excited about tonight. And I think that like our larger community is going to get a lot out of it. I'm excited to see who tunes in live, and what we've seen too is that a ton of people have been DMing us to post the recorded sessions. So being able to, like, actually have a place to host it'll be really exciting too.
Let me see. There was one thing I wanted to share. Just thinking about the other night's material segment. You know, I think basing the shoemaking on starting with materials is wonderful, but at the moment the toolbox is still small. And though we're not trying to, and I think the process started out with imitating leather. There are, if you look at the broad scope of what tanneries and so on did as far as iridescence and shine and softness and mattness and so many things to enhance the sort of the fashion toolbox. I think that that's an important thing going forward for sure.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting. We, for the first time, we're entering a time where, we're getting these lab grown materials, or at least materials that are born out of a lab. Like I said, scientists are working on these materials. And to your point, Terry, it's not really, I think this is one of the points you were making, is it's not really about mimicking the past so much as it's about just where we are right now and the present and the future. So materials that are completely unique, and they have their own signature because of how they're made, and they don't need to mimic anything else. Why plate it to make it look like leather if it's not really leather? And I think that the whole movement right now is about being authentic and not trying to be something that you're not. So yeah.
Exactly. In fact, I had a little insight from, I don't know, I don't want to go into, naming names of major players and so on, but I hear that there's a movement to have scientists look into nature itself to find out how nature develops some of these properties and so on, and to put that into their products. So, and
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I geek out over stuff like that.
These are both great points. I think I was trying to get on the call, Terry, that you're alluding to on Monday. Susan from Modern Meadow was mentioning that. She said that, like, we've mimicked leather, but we're now at this interesting crossroads where, like, we can create something entirely new that doesn't need to be mimicked, and it's kind of this future, and it's like this uncharted territory. Josh, which was kind of your point, which is like really interesting. And then the material just is the material. It's no longer imitation leather. It's just something entirely new.
Exactly. Right. It's some biomaterial.
Right. And where that can take us as far as what the eventual footwear will look like, will also be uncharted. I mean, within the realms of wearability and
right. Breathability, wearability, strength, dirt. Yeah. It's just, I really feel like the way we're engineering knit right now, we're actually going to be engineering the upper with those form and strength factors, like a warp knit, like a, what do you call it? What Nike calls it? There's flex knit, warp knit. Anyway, it's engineered. Once we get to the level where we can engineer an upper through the material itself, it's not going to be about mimicking anything. It's just going to be about that actual material, and that material will be, to your point, Stuart, and Modern Meadow and their research is, we can engineer, taking from nature, all of the incredible things that nature can already do, the way nature can tighten up, and then loosen up, and due to temperature changes, due to light changes, due to all these other, environmental, what do you call it? What would you call that? Due to everyday life and the elements coming at you in everyday life, the material will change and adapt. I know Nike's done a lot of studies on, where there's some of their performance gears, they have materials that will open up when you're running, and when the heat, there's basically sensitive to the heat, and the material will actually start to contract, and when it contracts, it opens up these holes. So it's bringing that level into the footwear. And, you know, that's one of the really, I think, exciting things about footwear is it's always on that leading edge of developing these new materials. I think even more so than a lot of the performance clothing and garment industry. Yeah. Sorry,
Josh,
I had to
that's a
get that
really
out.
interesting point. Do you think that that's just a function of footwear being such an ergonomical product, or do you think that has more to do with the fact that, like, I don't know, that people just tend to push the boundaries on footwear uniquely?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I really feel that, you know, shoes are an necessity. They're a necessity, but they're also an accessory.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's almost like they, you know, we have a different pair of shoes for our mood and our activities. So they span from so much more than I think garments. I feel that they have the potential to just and that's why we see the innovation coming out of footwear more than any, I think more than any other industry, at least in the design wearable industry. Bags don't have that kind of functionality. Backpacks, you see backpacks getting very technical, but they're not, you know, our feet move so much, and our feet are, you know, there's so many more bones in our feet, and the way they flex, and the size of them and the efficiency of making them. It's just footwear just, you know, it runs circles around accessories and the bag industry as
Well,
far as technology.
without question. I mean, not only I mean is it a basic need, but it's also a big indicator of personality.
Right. Totally. And then some of the things that I'm working on right now is how I'm working on some hard cases that get worn on the body, and that's kind of one of the hardest things to do. It's like, how do you make something that's hard and protective, uh, ergonomical, and uh, you know, user friendly when you're running with it? And you know, how do you design? You know, you look at nature and you look at, like, you know, things in nature that are hard and stiff. They have their structural elements to them, but you know, how do we take those structural elements and make them kind of soft and lightweight? And you know, one of the answers is technology and generative design, which, you know, these new CAD tools are giving us. But you can only go so far with it. So it's interesting, you know, my mind's always jumping back and forth from the kind of product design world to the footwear world. And I'm starting to see some bridges happening. It's just, I think they're all dictated by technology and the ability for us to get to a place, you know, with our 3D printers and efficiency with our 3D printers, so we could catch up to our actual ideas. So yeah, that's just some thoughts I've been having lately.
I love that. I love that, guys. I'm gonna save some of this conversation material for tonight too. Here's what I'm gonna quickly shut off our recording. Give me a sec.